it works. Might have to sit just. So thank you. My name is Paul Kernalugeun. Like I said, no experience with bison or anything. Grew up beside a producer, but really had limited experience with that even. Grew up on the same farm as Victor until I was 22, and two brothers were farming together and a bunch of kids coming home. So we moved off to a different farm in 2010, and this is the crew at home here. My parents, my wife Erin, and they're adding the next generation now. So 2010 we moved to an existing dairy farm in Birch Hills. And what we weren't prepared for was 2010 we had 45 inches at Birch Hills and 11 was 39. So much like here, I'm sure you guys might have even had more. So in 10 we didn't seed an acre. We just went around haying the whole country trying to get enough forage. And in 11 we got about 100 acres in on the four quarters immediately surrounding the barn. So this was 11, I believe. Most of the time we had two tractors on the mixer wagon just trying to get through the yard to do the daily chores, let alone field work. Fun was had by all. Even my mother thought her freaking lawnmower was four-wheel drive and we had to pull her out of the lawn multiple times. So this was our new reality. We were island farming. We'd have to pull the drill from one little island to the next all spring, and it continued for a couple years. So in 2011 we seeded roughly 110 of these acres. The bottom one was already into hay, but that's the little pieces we could get to. There were some bigger pieces that we just couldn't get anything to. So the average size of these islands was about 7 acres, but to add insult to injury, the first 50 feet of the perimeter of the island didn't amount to anything with barley, and it was even worse with corn. First 75 feet didn't amount to anything with corn. I was a dairy producer, had been through university, and dairy cattle were supposed to eat barley silage, alfalfa silage, and corn silage, and we fought with this for a few years and it wasn't working. We were putting copious amounts of inputs into all the land and only pulling off silage off of what ended up being 4 of the 7 acres. So it wasn't sustainable. Of the land we had left, we were only getting 58% production off of. So things had to change. We were quite literally at the bottom of Birch Hills. We had nowhere to drain water or pump water. All our neighbors were in the exact same spot. It was very costly. We were putting inputs in, not taking anything out, and then because we were so short on yield, we were trying to put even the poor forage along the perimeters in with the good stuff, so we were diluting our silage that we did have. So I think it was a professor at the university, my thesis advisor, Dave Christensen, that first told me that I should try oat silage. That and Victor's little brother was pretty adamant I should try oat silage. And I said, they don't eat oat silage. Like, dairy cattle eat barley and corn. That's what we're supposed to do. And so Dave Christensen was like, well, good oat silage is better than bad barley silage. So we tried that. It worked fairly well. They milked fairly well on it, better than what we had been doing. So at that point, if they eat oats, they'll probably eat anything. So I kept hearing this regenerative ag, mixing a bunch of species. Some things do well in the bottom of the slough, some things do well at the top. What is it? And all I knew was that multiple species grown together. So I thought I better look into it. So we did a 50 acre trial on little islands behind the feedlot so nobody could see it. And we were a bushel and a half of oats, bushel and a half of barley, bushel and a half of peas. And it ended up being the perfect year. It was hot in Birch Hills all year, and it seemed like we got a half an inch or an inch every weekend. It was just through the growing season, that's how it seemed to work. And so that crop, that 50 acres, did 16.9 tons to the acre at about a 65-69% moisture. And I had $37 into it. We didn't fertilize it, we had manure, we were limited on where we can spread manure, so we didn't do anything of that. And we were cutting, you can see the top picture, the swather's all the way over trying to touch that other swath. It was a 25-foot header, and he was only cutting about 18 because our 9-foot header on our forage harvester couldn't physically take anymore. We were down to less than a mile an hour trying to put it through. So because we hit the perfect year, kind of doomed us because we knew we were never going back. It just worked that well. We had yield right down to basically the cattails. We didn't have those perimeters that didn't amount to anything. And so we thought we better get serious. I'm sure you guys have at least heard about this, if not doing it. So when I started looking into it seriously, these principles kept coming up, the soil health principles. So there's 5 or 6. And the big thing that I had to understand or come to terms with is you're kind of going from a chemical based, which is what we were as conventional as you would use more fertilizer, or if I had to spray the corn 5 times instead of 4, I would have done it if someone would have convinced me and gave me an extra half a ton. And so we were switching from chemical to biological, and that was the biggest thing. So quickly go through the principles, how we tried to address them on our place. Minimal disturbance. So Victor and I are from St. Brew. This is Burgo Equipment's manufacturing St. Brew. We've had Burgo from the time that they started making it. World leaders in seeding technology. My brother's an R&D engineer for Burgo, so we're hardcore. But unbeknownst to my brother, because I was serious about this, I sold our Burgo drill and bought 1990 technology, and it was in that form, covered in bird shit. And that was my new metering system, because I wanted to go no-till. So Christmas was rough. He didn't talk to me, and I tried to add some frills, lights, cameras, make it more attractive. It was no go until he got to see what the zero-till could do. We were seeding into sod. We were seeding into land that we hadn't got to before for a few years because of the water. And once he saw the finish and the product afterwards, he came around and even was acting as my real-time blockage monitor there on the drill from time to time. So continuous roots is something we also incorporated, having short-lived perennials in our rotation now, so we weren't barley, corn, and mostly back and forth with those, the odd one, perennial. We do short-lived perennials now, 7 cuts, it's out. We added biannuals to the rotation, so a 2-year, just given that fall growth, early spring growth, taking advantage of that snow. And multi-cut species in all of our annuals. So you take off a cut of silage and you have thick regrowth coming back in the fall. Just an example of some biennial species we were using, and this would have been in about September on the right of just an example of the regrowth on a biannual. And this was an annual thing that we had taken off, so it's just annual silage. None of these are coming back year 2. This is just regrowth in year 1. So all kinds of possibilities with above ground livestock, late fall grazing, but what we thought we were really trying to achieve was feeding the below ground livestock. Soil armor, probably the hardest one to accomplish, especially when you're taking silage. You have nothing left to cover the ground with, so we very rarely do graze in the fall and let the snow put it down, trying to suppress weeds and everything else. 21, this one came to life for us. 21, where we had adequate armor to keep temperatures down and everything else, we saw a 1.8 to 2.1 yield difference, tons per acre yield difference, where we had adequate armor. 21 being the drought. So yeah, protects against wind and soil erosion, makes a great environment for below ground microbiology. So you can just kind of see the amount of armor we've got where we're trying to actually achieve it now. We were part of Soil Your Undies with the concept of burying tighty-whities in the spring, see what your microorganisms are doing all throughout the year. It's supposed to help a lot if you've got the armor. So this was in 21. We buried them in the spring, and from spring seeding till silaging, we had 7/10 of rain. We dug those up. There was literally, they weren't even hardly discolored. I dug them up right at silaging. Threw them back in the hole, luckily. I don't know why I threw them back in the hole. Threw them back in the hole, covered the dirt up, and then about 3 days after silaging, we had 2 inches of rain. And that's where all of this regrowth in the background came from. So we had more growth, regrowth, and potential in species coming after we'd silaged than what we silaged. This is maybe October, so those microbes came back, took advantage of all those green living roots, and there was a lot of activity. Livestock integration, so on the dairy side, you're seeing less and less of this. we're devoting more and more acres to kicking cows out. I guess raised on where we were raised, feedlot, cow-calf, and there's something to just going out and hearing cattle graze. It's probably the funnest one we've integrated, mixed with all the benefits of animals on the land. So yeah, this was just power company went and took down a bunch of poles. They always rot in the yard. We always have grand plans of doing something with the poles. We finally did it and gave all the neighbors something to talk about, thinking we were grazing bison. So plant diversity, obviously the biggest one for us with the topography, just the little holes and potholes and stuff like that. So the idea is a 15-way mix, something that's going to grow really well on top of the hilltops and something beside the sloughs. So this has been the biggest game changer for us, utilizing all the acres we can. A couple of examples: warm and cool season grasses, warm and cool season broadleaves, warm and cool legumes. Just an example, again, 21 showed us a lot of things. I think it's important to show the struggles. You can see the oats, they did okay in the dry up top here, so 2, maybe 2.5 feet tall. But as you come down to a slough that we had dried out, you can see how much more clover is in the bottom where the oats peter out. And it just keeps getting more extreme. And then you can just see those broader leaves in the middle are your tillage radish that we had broadcasting around the sloughs for years, trying to dry things out. Context, again, one of the harder ones, trying to not get stuck in a box and be open-minded in that. We didn't turn to soil health for a noble reason. We were backed into a corner because of all that wet, and we had to change. So as much as I'm presenting here today, it's not because we thought it was a good idea necessarily. It was just we were having to look at buying more land because we were backed into a corner. So now we've tried to remain open-minded, or as much as we think we can, and that's probably one of the biggest things. But where we use context today is addressing resource concerns of each field. So whether it's water infiltration, compaction, weed pressure, or building organic matter, that's where this context comes into play. So here's an example. We got a call from a neighbor, retired, has a piece down by the river, very sandy land, wanted us to grow something for the deer. And so his last piece we seeded, threw in some warm season, something we thought would do relatively well on light land. And I hadn't seen it. I wasn't supposed to do anything with it. But I got a call from him in late August, and he was panicked because he wasn't going to be able to see the deer anymore. He said, "Come get this shit out of here." So we went, and it worked out good for us. He didn't even want us to leave a corner for the deer to eat in. It's way too tall, take it all. So that was just designing a blend that we thought would be beneficial for that light land. Here's another, this was some trials, 3-acre trials on a tired hay stand, predominantly all grass. We just drilled directly into it after a pre-burn. This is one of the 5 3-acre trials, and it was called a high protein blend. And we found that when you drill in high volumes of legumes, the ground seems to accept it. It's a lack of nitrogen anyway, and it seems like it takes really well. So we were extremely happy with this, and now taking out perennials and tired hay stand situations, whether it's neighbors or whatever, we'll go in and drill in this tired hay stand piece, which is essentially oats, which you can kind of see on the far side there. Oats and a lot of legumes tend to do super well for us. Another example of getting over not putting in synthetic. It was a hard thing for us to take that chance, but somewhere I had heard above every acre there's 32 metric tons of atmospheric nitrogen. All you have to do is seed the plant that's going to put it in the ground. So why the hell would you ever write a check for it? And so it made a lot of sense to us. Here's an example of just some nodulations on different things. I'm not sure if you can see it, but if you open up those nodules and they're bright red, it means they're actively fixing, and so it's fun to go along and cut those nodules open to see what's happening. And they do fix when there is no backup. Weed suppression in a biannual. So this is the crop that's growing back next year. You've seeded it on year 1. She regrows on the end of year 1, and she comes back. This is pictures of year 2 of it coming back. No inputs. We do nothing. So it's if you have 100, 150 acres in rotation, that's 150 acres we're not seeding the following year. So it takes the pressure off field work as well. You can see that type of rooting of this is Kernalugeun just after 1 year. And you can see how the biannuals shift that fungal to bacteria ratio more to the fungal. And all your annual weeds, your pigweeds, your wild oats, lamb's quarters, are nitrate-seeking weeds. So you plant things that swing that fungal ratio more to the fungal, it tends to take care of them. So we have no herbicide option for this because it's a blend of broadleaves and grasses. So it's just examples showing what it looks like and how clean that biannual tends to be. And it's just another tool because when you first get into it, it's intimidating for weed pressure. How is this ever going to work with no in-crop options? So with the sloughs, broadcasting, water infiltration was a big thing. We go around after June 1st, broadcast around all the existing sloughs just to continually gain more land. And just examples of things that we use. So yeah, we started as a trial. I was pretty skeptical of this one even after I thought I was open-minded, like a quad spreader, driving around sloughs, getting stuck, someone coming and pulling me out quite often as well. We were doing about $1,500 worth of seed, but the amount of land we gained back was the cheapest land we've ever bought. And so it got us past that cattail, thistle, thatch, and got us to be able to seed right up against the water. So here's an example of 2018. I only did one half section. We did everything over here. See, there's just a little bit of water left. There's no culvert through this road. This side we hadn't done anything, so in 2018 we decided it was worthwhile to do the whole farm. 3 years later we were seeding through this, and you can see we're still just getting this slough on this side. And in fact, when we were putting in those big corner posts, we had a leveler. So we set it up with a laser, and the left side's actually deeper. So we drained the deeper side first, which I thought was interesting. We didn't know that until 21. So that's what the radishes look like after being broadcast around the sloughs, and that's how close you can get when you're seeding right along the water when you seed it. Just helps you get there. Lots of learning curves, although you can't see it in the picture, but all those grapple teeth, there's 5 grapple teeth, and they're all set off to the side. So that was me not believing somebody that you can have too many broadleaves. That was a lot of forage collards put into that blend. Made it extremely hard to dry down, so it was very wet silage. In the winter, -30, we were breaking off chunks of silage the size of Volkswagens, putting it into the mixer wagon. Result, no grapple teeth left by the end of winter. But we had a lot of fun. So just a few fun examples of going regen and cover crops. Here's an example of fava beans. We have had peas lay our crop down, and then fun is not had anymore. Just splitting the ratio of peas you use with fava beans, they're like little spruce trees, keeps everything standing up, and your crops don't fall down anymore. So lots of learning. So the real test, 2014, that's what the map looked like, and that wasn't even a bad year. I just had to go with what Google Maps had of our thing. So 10 and 11 were the worst. We're starting to get some back by then. But that's us today. We did not seed, I guess 21, we did not seed about 50 acres worth of sloughs. So we went from 110 back to 550 on the 4 quarters. Railroad tracks and highway take out some as well. But yeah, it's been dry. Everything's going that way. We're infiltrating, we're seeding things. So the real test is if we get another 30 inches, what's it going to look like? Are we going to fill right back up, or will we be able to take more? And so the hope is we can take more. We've got far better infiltration tests. So this is some of last year's. I've shown you a lot of pictures of the trying years. So just to give you some encouragement that it can be a lot of fun for polycropping. No synthetics, no in-crop spraying, and you can do a lot. It's a whole system. There's a lot of things that a person has to think about to manage, but be very profitable. So maybe this is the only part Avery wanted me to get to, but he was always telling me to put things into writing, so I had to sit down and actually do a few things. So I'll try and go through this quick. Early on, we realized that grow your protein, buy your energy. Protein's 50% more expensive. Canola meal versus barley or whatever, it's 50% more expensive per ton. So we started, when we first started, corn was $350 an acre. So you do the math on that. Today's polycrop's 40 to 60. I went in the middle 50. $300 an acre savings on the inputs. Just inputs. I haven't. Everybody does their own opportune costs and market costs and whatever, but just inputs. 30,000 there on 100 acres. That's what we usually did for corn. Our barley on 125, $75 savings. The other 450 acres, another 33 in some. So savings on growing protein versus energy. That's what we were looking at just on the polycrops. This is where it really comes into effect. When we were growing corn and having poor corn crops, most of the time it wasn't good enough for our lactating cows. So you feed it to the heifers, and what do heifers need? Protein. What does poor corn silage not have? Any protein. So we were using the Super B of canola meal every 5 weeks. Today's price, this winter, we're still feeding a little bit early in the winter. They wanted 650 a metric ton, 44 metric ton, 28 grand. We were buying every 5 weeks, 10.4 loads a year, resulted in 300,000 in canola meal. Whereas today, thankfully, we're down to Super B every 30 to 32 weeks, meaning 1 2/3 of the load every year, bringing it to 47. So the savings on growing our protein versus taking that chance on corn especially, $300,000 difference. But that wasn't the biggest, it wasn't all of it. So we started looking at peas and oats in place of barley grain. And it came out of this book, What Your Food Ate. I was loading straw bales down by the river when I came across the part in this book talked about intercropping 2 crops together. They were saying you should take the grain intercrop that was grown together. It's got a better germ, better vigor, and all this other stuff. And good neighbors of mine had grown peas and oats together, so it's like, well, let's get a feed test. And because barley was getting more and more expensive this winter, and doing the math on peas and oats, it was far better. Did an analysis on the pea oat blend, 16.7 crude protein, 82.2 TDN. It was the same as my barley, but I was gaining a whole bunch of points on my protein. So that resulted in barley was at 413. I could buy it for the peas and oats delivered 308, difference of 105, 89 cents per head, and then we got feeding it, and based on our MUNs, milk, urea, nitrogen, we were suspicious because it was $650 for this canola meal. We took the canola meal out just to see what would happen. We were overproducing at the time. The worst that could happen is we crash them a little bit. Let's see. Suspicion was correct. We didn't need the canola meal. We were maintaining good MUNs. It bumped us up to $1.29 per head per day savings. 126 cows, $162 a day. Meant across the year another 60 grand in savings. So one last unforeseen. You're getting paid off of kgs of butter fat in the industry. So the amount of kgs of butter fat a cow produces, the more efficient she is if you can bump it up. So as we traded in our barley for peas and oats, over a 5-week window, our butter fat slowly rose from 4.4 to 4.75. So 36 liters, they never dipped in production yield, their components just came up. So we were averaging that much of an increase per head per day, which meant we were making an additional $2.73 per head, 126 cows. So we were saving that 60 grand, but we were also increased 125,000 in yield on a per head per day basis. So in summary of, I guess, long story short, 10 years ago we were severely challenged, tried to change because we were forced to. It wasn't anything noble. It worked for us, and then trying to continue to be open-minded and there's a different way or whatever, it's really paid off for us. So just this one experiment from this winter, peas and oats from barley. So savings over barley, increased components, 184, compounded with the protein savings of canola meal, added together, the saving on inputs of the polycrops versus the corn, for a final number of $500,000. That's not that we've made $500,000, it's that we've made and saved together. So it's the combination of the two has just increased the bottom line from that, and that's all of it together. So just to give an example of something as crazy as trying peas and oats, which we didn't think would work, but we were in a position because of other changes we had made that we didn't have a lot to lose to try it, and it resulted in a good thing. So that might be something a little bit closer that you as bison producers can take home, is try something different. If you're on pellets, try some commodities. If you're on commodities and it's getting too expensive, try something else. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had, but if there's any questions, I can try and answer them. Yeah.
What was the change on your balance sheet when you converted your iron to different iron?
Yeah, ours was old enough. It wasn't crazy. We did sell that equipment for quite a bit more than we bought the old one for. But like just even that box drill, just the fact that we're not running a fan, so you're seating at 1150 RPM. You know, I can do just about all of those acres with a Fendt tractor at a tank and a half of fuel. You know what I mean? Instead of having something revved right out, running that fan. So even just something like that made a big difference. Yeah. Hopefully some of that made sense anyway.
So great. So what kind of mixes were you putting in your seed areas?
Yeah, it's kind of a wet acre blend, like sweet clover was one.
Okay.
Daikon radish if you spread it after the summer solstice. Otherwise it just bolts and goes to head, and your root is about that big.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
yeah, if you do it after the 20th of June, you get those tubers going. Festuloleum, I believe, is in there as well. Japanese millet, because it's actually a millet that does really well in wet, and it's pretty hardy, competes pretty well. Chicory would be in there. Chicory, you have to be okay with it coming back every year. It's a short-lived perennial.
Do they eat it?
Yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. It's a natural dewormer as well. It's easy on the root.
Oh, okay.
Pollinator attractants.
Very pretty also.
Yeah.
And scary. Might be pretty, but it's also scary. Like my chicory average last year was probably 5 feet high.
Really? I'd be so excited or something.
What was your water infiltration? Did you do any water infiltration testing?
I didn't originally. I'd have to do it on the neighbors or something like that. But now we can't. So Phil's girlfriend works with Kara out at Owen, and I think we can do 2 inches in under a minute and a half now. So it increased substantially, and we see it. Like, I've got a picture on my phone. I was driving home in a downpour, like just one cloud came, and the road, it was too fast for the road that I've been driving, a little dirt road through the field. It was just a lake, and we came back out, and there's nothing there. 2 hours later, and we were seeding the next day because we had the armor to, we were not on mud anymore. We're always seeding through litter, but it goes away very fast. We've got soil probes. We're part of that Northern Plains program. I think Foam Lake has a division, and Melford's got a division. So they've put soil probes in the fields now. It's a lot of fun to see you build that resilience. But yeah, the way we were farming, it wouldn't have been good.
Just mention what happened to your sloughs this year.
Yeah. Well, now we're kind of scratching our heads just a little bit, because this year, up until just recently, we've been very dry. And sloughs I've gotten through originally, like some of the earlier sloughs that I've always been, like last 3 or 4 years that we've seeded through no problem. Now it was dry, they had water in them, and the stuff that I had just been finishing up has drained, and so it really was bothering me, and the neighbors are all dry. Like, we've essentially gotten past the slough problem, but I had water coming, and so I talked to some other people in the university a bit, and they got me onto kind of like water hydrology and how that works. And I can't speak on it very much, but it's kind of like after you infiltrate so much, it can only take so much, and it'll start pumping it back up. And so if any of you know or knew Neil Dennis at Woda, he's kind of like the pioneer in Canada for mob grazing. He had the same thing. He dried up all his sloughs and then actually ended up over a 16-year period kicking out running springs on his land. So I don't want to compare myself to him because he was definitely intense, more intense than me, but it seems like we're starting to see some of that happening. So I might just have to make peace with always having a little bit of water out there.
When you just broadcast right into the Kattle
Yeah.
facility.
My little broadcaster, you can kind of point it one direction, so I'll just point it to the right. And I basically try and make ripples in the water if I can get it. Kind of like sweet clover, festuloleum, Japanese millet, chicory, and then the radishes are sometimes in there, sometimes not. If you do the radishes, they have to be after June 20th, otherwise they just bolt and go to head immediately. You only get a tuber about the size of your pinky. Yeah. After, you can get the great big tubers pushing way down. Yeah. But yeah.
Any more questions? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paul and Phil, both. That was a good